The Supreme Court's verdict on Keir Starmer's foreign policy strategy is not merely a legal decision. It is a political reckoning. The ruling has sent shockwaves through Westminster, exposing not just the fragility of Starmer's leadership but also the underlying deception in his carefully crafted post-Brexit political manoeuvring. There is no longer any room for doubt. Starmer's true agenda was always to drag the United Kingdom back under the influence of Brussels, but he was hoping to achieve this quietly, by stealth, and without the public's consent. The court's verdict obliterates that plan, and in doing so, it has left Starmer's credibility in ruins. This wasn't a minor setback. It was a catastrophic failure, and Starmer's leadership is now hanging by a thread. The Labour Party's inability to present a clear, honest, and consistent stance on Brexit has been its downfall for years, and today's ruling confirms that its leader has been engaged in political gamesmanship so extreme that even the courts could not ignore it. Starmer's efforts to push through policies that align the UK with the European Union, under the guise of promoting economic stability, have been exposed as nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to revise Brexit without the people's mandate. The court has now firmly put a stop to that. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, Starmer's desperate team will likely continue to double down on their disingenuous claims that the ruling is a mere technicality. Let's not mince words. The Labour Party's approach to post-Brexit governance has been an unmitigated disaster. They never accepted the will of the people in 2016, and now we see the true extent of their desire to drag Britain back into the EU fold, this time, without the necessary democratic consent. The Supreme Court's ruling isn't simply a blow to Starmer's foreign policy, it is a full-scale political demolition of the foundation he had hoped to build. For months, Labour has dismissed concerns about Starmer's attempts to realign UK trade laws with EU regulations as paranoid conjecture. Now, that so-called conspiracy theory has been proven true. The highest court in the land has struck down key parts of Starmer's legislation, exposing a reckless abuse of power, all in the pursuit of an agenda that was never openly discussed with the public. The question now is whether Starmer will be able to salvage his leadership, or if he will be remembered as the man who led Labour straight into political and legal ruin. The damage is extensive. Labour MPs who once followed his every word are now scrambling to distance themselves from him, openly questioning his judgment. For too long, Starmer's leadership relied on a facade of competence, but this ruling has stripped that illusion away. His entire strategy was predicated on quietly bypassing Parliament, hoping to avoid public scrutiny and stifle opposition to his backdoor plans to reintegrate Britain with the European Union. It was an arrogance of the highest order, based on the assumption that the political establishment could continue to dictate the future of the nation without being held accountable. What we are witnessing now is not just a political crisis, it is an existential moment for the Labour Party. The fractures within the party have always been there, but the ruling has exposed the fault lines in a way that nothing else could. Labour was never unified on the issue of Brexit, but now that the truth has come out, the cracks are becoming chasms. The party's most ardent pro-EU members are looking to Starmer for leadership, but their counterparts, those who support Brexit, are no longer willing to play along. The party is in free fall, and every minute Starmer clings to power is another minute of chaos. Labour's unity has crumbled, and there is little to no chance that they will recover from this scandal anytime soon. Starmer's attempt to reshape Britain's post-Brexit future without securing the consent of the British people is a betrayal of the highest order. The Supreme Court's verdict has made it abundantly clear that he overreached, attempting to forge policies that had no legal or democratic basis. Starmer's move was not just a misstep in governance, it was a flagrant violation of the principles of transparency and accountability that every democratic leader should uphold. And yet, despite all of this, his party's leadership continues to pretend that they can somehow spin their way out of this mess. There is no longer any room for denial. The public, the press, and the opposition will not let this pass unnoticed. Let's be clear, the ruling is not just a legal victory for the British people. It is a political coup for the opposition, which has been handed an unprecedented weapon to dismantle Starmer's already tenuous leadership. The Conservative Party, as well as Reform UK, have every reason to capitalise on this moment. Nigel Farage, no stranger to political opportunism, has already seized the opportunity to brand Starmer as a deceiver. And the criticism will only intensify in the coming weeks. With Starmer's credibility shattered and Labour in disarray, the opposition can now point to this legal debacle as proof that Starmer is not just unfit to lead, he is actively working against the very interests of the British people. In the end, the question is not whether Starmer can recover, he cannot. The question is whether Labour can survive his leadership. If the party is to have any hope of a political future, it must rid itself of the man who has led it into the disaster of this ruling. The Supreme Court has delivered a verdict, and now it's time for Labour to deliver its own, a verdict on the leadership of Keir Starmer.